The descent. The darkness came swiftly to the prairie, as it always did once the sun surrendered to the horizon. Sarah stood at the kitchen window, watching the last copper light fade from the western sky, her reflection ghosting back at her in the glass. A girl who looked older than her 17 years, lines of worry already etching themselves around her eyes. Behind her, Eleanor moved quietly through the room, gathering what they would need. A coil of rope, 2 lanterns, their wicks freshly trimmed, matches wrapped in oilcloth, a canteen of water. The hunting knife that had belonged to Eleanor's father, its blade still sharp after all these years. "Thomas is asleep," Eleanor said softly. "I checked twice." Sarah turned from the window. Her mother's face was drawn tight with determination, but Sarah could see the fear underneath, the same fear that sat like a stone in her own chest. They were about to descend into an unknown darkness, chasing a secret that had driven the Henderson family to flee in the night. "We don't have to do this," Sarah said, though she didn't mean it. They both knew there was no other choice. Eleanor's jaw set. "Yes, we do. Your father will be back tomorrow, and when he returns, I want to know what we're fighting for, or if we should take Blackwood's money and leave." The words hung between them, the possibility of surrender, of admitting defeat. Sarah thought of the Henderson letters hidden beneath her mattress, the desperation in those hastily scrawled lines. "He knows about the mine. We can't stay. God forgive us for what we're leaving behind." What had they left behind? What was worth more than their lives? "Then we go," Sarah said. They waited another hour until the moon rose, a waning crescent that gave just enough light to navigate by. Sarah pulled on her father's old work coat, too large in the shoulders, and wound a scarf around her neck. The September night had teeth. By October, it would bite clean through to the bone. They moved like shadows across their own land, away from the house and the barn where the horses stirred restlessly in their stalls. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, painted silver and black by moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a lonely, rising wail that made Sarah's skin prickle. The mine shaft waited where they'd left it. The boards still pulled aside, revealing the mouth of darkness beneath. Eleanor knelt at the edge and lowered the first lantern on its rope, playing out the line slowly. The light descended, painting the earthen walls in shifting amber, until it reached the bottom. 30 feet down, maybe more. "No water," Eleanor said, relief evident in her voice. "It must drain somewhere." Sarah peered into the shaft. The bottom was indeed dry, scattered with fallen earth and what looked like old timbers. The air rising from below smelled of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sharp. "I'll go first," Sarah said. Eleanor caught her arm. "Sarah, I'm lighter. If the rope holds for me, it'll hold for you." It was logic, not bravery, but Eleanor's eyes shone with something that might have been pride. She tested the rope around the old oak's trunk, pulling hard, then helped Sarah tie a loop around her waist. "If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call up to me," Eleanor said. "Promise me." "I promise." Sarah sat at the edge of the shaft, her legs dangling into darkness, and for a moment she couldn't move. Every instinct screamed against descending into that black mouth in the earth. But she thought of her father's defeated shoulders, of Thomas's too adult understanding of their poverty, of Blackwood's men watching their land with proprietary eyes. She pushed off. The descent was slower than she'd imagined, the rope rough against her palms even through her gloves. The earthen walls slid past, carved out by hands long gone, shored up with timbers that creaked ominously as she passed. The air grew colder, damper, pressing against her face like a wet cloth. Then her feet touched bottom. "I'm down," she called up, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. She untied herself and grabbed the lantern, holding it high. The shaft opened into a small chamber, perhaps 10 feet across, with a low tunnel leading off into darkness. The walls here weren't just earth. She could see exposed rock, and running through the rock, like frozen lightning, were veins of something that glittered in the lamplight. Sarah's breath caught. She moved closer, touching the wall with trembling fingers. The veins were thin, no thicker than her little finger, but they ran through the rock in a web of metallic threads. Silver? Gold? She didn't know enough to tell, but whatever it was, it had been enough to make Blackwood hunt for this place. Enough to make the Hendersons flee. "Sarah?" Eleanor's voice drifted down, tight with worry. There's a tunnel, and Mother, there's metal in the rock. I think this is a real mine. A pause then. I'm coming down. Sarah watched the rope descend again, this time bearing Eleanor's weight. Her mother joined her moments later, breathing hard, her own lantern casting wild shadows as she took in the chamber. Dear God, Eleanor whispered. She moved to the wall, running her hands over the metallic veins. This is what Blackwood wants. This is why he's buying up all the land around here. But why abandon it? Sarah asked. If the Hendersons found this, why not work it? Why run? Eleanor turned to face the tunnel entrance. Maybe we're about to find out. The tunnel was low enough that they had to duck, and narrow enough that Sarah's shoulders brushed both walls. The timbers here were older, more weathered, and some had partially collapsed, forcing them to climb over fallen earth and splintered wood. The metallic veins continued, growing thicker as they progressed deeper into the hill. After perhaps 50 feet, the tunnel opened into a larger space, a worked chamber where someone had clearly spent considerable time excavating. Tool marks scarred the walls. Broken implements lay scattered across the floor, a rusted pickaxe, a bent shovel, a miner's pan, and in the corner, barely visible in the lamplight, a skeleton. Eleanor gasped and grabbed Sarah's arm. They stood frozen, staring at the crumpled remains. The bones were old, scattered by time or animals, still partially clothed in rotted fabric. Beside the skeleton lay a leather satchel, its straps cracked and brittle. Sarah forced herself forward, kneeling beside the remains. It's old, she said, her voice shaking. Years old. This isn't the Hendersons. The original miner, Eleanor said quietly, the one who dug this shaft. Sarah reached for the satchel, then hesitated. Disturbing the dead felt wrong, sacrilegious. But they needed to know. She lifted the bag carefully and it nearly fell apart in her hands. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow preserved them, were papers. She unfolded them with shaking fingers. The first was a crude map, showing the mine shaft and surrounding area. The second was a letter, the handwriting cramped and desperate. June 1878. I, William Garrett, being of sound mind, do hereby record that I have discovered a significant silver deposit on Section 15, Township 12, Range 7. The vein runs deep and true. I have staked my claim with the Dominion Land Office, but I fear my partner, C. Blackwood, means to take this discovery for himself. He has grown violent in his demands. I no longer feel safe. If anything should happen to me, let this letter stand as testimony that this mine is my discovery, my claim, my legacy for my children. The letter was signed and dated. Sarah's hands trembled as she passed it to Eleanor. Blackwood, Eleanor breathed. He's been after this mine for 6 years. He probably killed this man. And when the Hendersons found it, he came after them too, Sarah said. The pieces were falling into place, a picture of greed and violence stretching back years. That's why they ran. They knew what happened to Garrett. A sound echoed down the tunnel, a scrape of boot on rock. Both women froze, their eyes meeting in the lamplight. Someone else was in the mine. Eleanor grabbed Sarah's wrist, pulling her toward the back of the chamber, away from the tunnel entrance. They extinguished one lantern, keeping only one burning low. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. Footsteps now, unmistakable, coming closer. A light appeared in the tunnel mouth, another lantern, brighter than theirs. I know you're in here, Mrs. Mackenzie. Robert Kane's voice rolled through the chamber, calm and assured. You and your daughter. Did you really think we wouldn't be watching? He emerged from the tunnel, ducking under the low entrance, his lantern held high. Behind him came another man, broader, shorter, with a scarred face Sarah didn't recognize. This is private property, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the fear Sarah could feel radiating from her. You're trespassing. Kane smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Private property? Mrs. Mackenzie, you don't even own this land yet. You're 3 years into a 5-year homestead claim, and you're about to default to the bank. In 30 days, this will be Mr. Blackwood's property. We're just getting an early look at our investment. His eyes moved to the skeleton, to the papers in Sarah's hands. I see you found old Garrett. Poor bastard. Had a good claim, refused to sell, met with an unfortunate accident. The Hendersons were smarter. They left before anything unfortunate could happen to them. The casual admission of murder made Sarah's blood run cold. "You killed him." "I did no such thing," Kane said. "I wasn't even in Canada in 1878. But Mr. Blackwood, well, he's been in the land business a long time. Sometimes accidents happen to stubborn men." Eleanor moved slightly, positioning herself between Sarah and the two men. "What do you want?" "The same thing we've always wanted. Your land, your signature on a deed of sale. But now," Kane's eyes glittered in the lamplight, "now you know too much. That complicates things." The scarred man moved to the side, cutting off their angle to the tunnel. They were trapped 30 feet underground, with two of Blackwood's men between them and escape. Sarah's mind raced. The rope was still hanging in the main shaft, but they'd never reach it before these men caught them. The tunnel behind them might lead deeper, but it could also be a dead end. They had one lantern, a knife, and the truth about a 6-year-old murder. "My husband knows we're here," Eleanor said, though it was a transparent lie. "If we don't return—" "Your husband is in Medicine Hat, drinking himself into a stupor at the Prairie Rose Saloon," Kane interrupted. "He'll be there until morning, and by then, well, accidents happen. Cave-ins, unstable mine shafts, two women exploring where they shouldn't, and the earth gives way. Tragic, really." He took a step closer. Sarah's hand found the knife at her mother's belt, closing around the handle. She'd never used a blade against a person, never imagined she could. But looking at Kane's cold smile, at the scarred man's predatory stance, she knew she would do whatever was necessary. "Don't be foolish, girl," Kane said, seeing the movement. "We don't want to hurt you. Mr. Blackwood would prefer this to be clean. Sell us the land, take the money, leave. You can start over somewhere else, somewhere safer." "With the knowledge that you murdered a man for this mine?" Eleanor asked. "You'd let us walk away with that?" Kane's smile faded. "No," he admitted. "Probably not." The scarred man lunged. Everything happened at once. Eleanor shoved Sarah backward, hard, sending her stumbling toward the back wall. The knife fell from Sarah's grip, clattering on stone. The scarred man grabbed Eleanor, and she screamed, a sound of pure rage, driving her elbow into his face. Blood sprayed from his nose. Kane moved toward Sarah, but she grabbed the fallen pickaxe, swinging it wildly. The rusted tool connected with his lantern, shattering the glass. Hot oil splashed, and suddenly there was fire, a line of flame racing across the spilled fuel. The chamber filled with smoke and confusion. Sarah couldn't see, couldn't breathe. She heard her mother screaming her name, heard men cursing, felt heat on her face. She stumbled forward, hands outstretched, and found Eleanor's arm. Together, they ran. The tunnel was pitch black without the lanterns, but they had no choice. They ran blind, hands on the walls, stumbling over debris, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Sarah's lungs burned. Her shin cracked against something hard, and she bit back a cry of pain. Then, ahead, a faint lessening of the darkness. The main shaft, the rope. They burst into the chamber, and Sarah looked up at the distant circle of moonlight, impossibly far above. Eleanor grabbed the rope, testing it frantically. "You first," she gasped. "Climb, don't stop." "Mother, climb." Sarah climbed, hand over hand, feet braced against the earthen wall, muscles screaming. Below, she heard shouting, heard Eleanor cry out. She looked down and saw the scarred man emerging from the tunnel, saw him grab Eleanor's leg as she started to climb. Sarah made a decision. She let go. She fell 10 feet, landing hard on the scarred man's shoulders, driving him to the ground. Pain exploded through her body, but she rolled away, gasping. Eleanor was already climbing again, moving fast. "Go!" Sarah screamed. "Go!" She scrambled to her feet, dove for the rope, and climbed. Her hands were slick with sweat, her arms shaking, but terror gave her strength. Below, the scarred man was getting up, reaching for her feet. She kicked down, connected with something, heard him grunt. Then Eleanor's hands were gripping her wrists, hauling her up and over the edge. They collapsed on the prairie grass, gasping, as angry shouts echoed from the shaft below. Eleanor moved fast, untying the rope from the tree, pulling it up. Without it, the men were trapped, at least until they could fashion another way out. "Run," Eleanor whispered, "before they find another exit." They ran through the moonlit prairie, stumbling over grass and stones until the house appeared ahead. Thomas stood on the porch in his nightshirt, his eyes wide. "What happened?" he asked as they staggered up the steps. "I heard." "Inside," Eleanor commanded. Lock the doors, windows too. They barricaded themselves in the house, Sarah's hands still shaking as she slid the heavy bar across the door. Eleanor moved through the rooms, checking every lock, every window, the hunting rifle now in her hands. Only when they were as secure as they could be did Eleanor sink into a chair, her face pale. "They know," she whispered. "They know we know." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. In her pocket, crumpled but intact, was William Garrett's letter, proof of Blackwood's crime, proof of their claim to the mine, proof that would either save them or get them killed. Outside, in the darkness, Sarah thought she heard the sound of horses, riders circling their homestead like wolves around wounded prey. They had 30 days before the bank took their land. But looking at her mother's terrified face, at Thomas's wide eyes, Sarah wondered if they had even 30 hours. The war for their homestead had begun, and they had just drawn first blood.